Hey everyone, so it seems it's finally time to dig deep into Undertale Yellow's Genocide route. This is also a sequel in a way to the neutral ending video, as here I will be clarifying some stuff I missed in the previous video as well as talking about how horrific the Genocide route is. Because while the neutral ending was a psychological horror experience, the Genocide route is more like an apocalyptic nightmare. It's not only challenging as hell, but there are some tracks and moments in the route that I say is downright disturbing. We'll go into that momentarily, but first I want to shout out some comments I read in the neutral ending video that deserve to have some spotlight and some clarifications to the video. So let's get into it. Firstly, I want to highlight this comment made by Lucer8070. I'll be reading all they said out loud, but firstly, shout out to them and thank you for your support on the video. Here it is. Since I love everything Toby Fox related religiously and love everything about this fan game, here's some cool observations I made. The neutral route can actually be obtained by killing only minor monsters, Martlet having special dialogue for when you kill more than 0 XP but are still level 1. There are 3 possible act options that restore HP, Endure, Hope, and Persist, which are the only self-positive options available. In Phase 1, Flowey sometimes uses an attack from a main character you kill during the run, with the creepy distortion of the character accompanying the attack. The background of the Asriel/Flowey memories are a huge pile of withered flowers, likely paralleling the countless times he has reset the timeline, or brought himself to the edge of death. The music in the Snowdin segment is a slowdown part from the actual Snowdin theme, plus a few audio effects. The Phase 2 theme is not only an absolute bop, but also features multiple audio clips from a Ronald McDonald commercial that Toby originally sampled for Flowey a few times as well. All the specimens use creepy art styles and sound fonts from other games. There are also probably meant to reference a few creepypasta bits too. Specimen Clay actually features Prunzel as an attack, which is just genius. The more neutral runs you complete, the more Flowey will grow suspicious of a presence other than Clover, aka the player. Also, the way he looks directly through the 4th wall at the end of the fight gave me literal chills a few times. I've played this game far too often. And one more comment I want to highlight is this one made by Toastinator2242, which goes over something I overlooked in the neutral route video. Shout out to them as well. Here's some things I've noticed. Most of the Metafly attacks are based off of Clover themselves, as her soul has already been absorbed and the entire fight is essentially just Flowey playing with his own food. Guns, Clover's main weapon. Plus bombs and X bombs, original soul mechanics from the Mettaton EX fight. Waving hand, symbolizes the ability to act. This could also mean mercy, as it may be waving goodbye. Horse riding, with the horse being Flowey, which I feel describes a relationship through most of the game. And a few things that Flowey thrown in, such as mouth plants, friendliness pellets, bone/vine spikes, and everything else. All the specimens I also believe are based off of childhood experiences. Patchworked, cute plushies and dolls, attacks with buttons, obvious, and nails, so I think it can be a pincushion. Organic, school/biology, most likely a child-friendly drawing from a textbook or from an educational cartoon. The attacks are pretty obvious in meaning. Clay, come on, do I need to spell it out for you? Clay is just straight fun for real. Attacks with clay globs, obvious, but I find it cool how it absorbs into the clay itself. Prunzel, it could be a clay glob, but I like to think that Asriel's search of creepypastas. Color beams, clay can be colorful and quite artistic. Other than this, I have nothing. Overall, this gives me a Sea in the Sea vibe, mixed with the Yoshi's Island because of the music and the art style. That was a long one. Paper, again obvious. I don't have much to say, but I will point out the attacks of the crumbled paper and flying thorns, which are actually paper airplanes. I love that detail. Also notice that the way its vines are actually very similar to Mega Flowey. Polygonal, early video games, likely PS1 or N64 era. CRT screens, and I think there is some creepypasta mixed in. The only specimen to attack with friendly is pellets, but also noble attacks are petals. The only specimen to attack with friendliness pellets, but other noble attacks are petals and the monster flies, which I believe is again Asriel enjoying learning about creepypastas, even if they freak him out. The red version of Flowey also supports his creepypasta theory. Mechanical, action cartoonish just as G.I. Joe, maybe some other influences that I don't get. Not much to say really, the attacks are just bullets and saws. Also my first specimen, and I found Michigan Flowey absolutely hilarious for no reason. And that's all. I would like to include more, but I don't want to keep you guys waiting for too long, but I just want to thank everyone again for the support and for some comments that did prove to be quite intriguing. Anyways, now into the Genocide route. So we're mainly going to go over highlights from the Genocide route because let's be honest, if I covered everything we'd be here all day. However, we'll go in chronological order and from there I'll give some of my own thoughts, starting with the ruins section. I think the first thing I want to mention is how there are literal sprites for Genocide attacks, which is really neat since Undertale did do the same thing, but it feels a lot sadder in this version. So just when you attack Pinnell in the ruins, when a paintbrush breaks in half. After some dialogue from Flowey in the cornfields and after some monster killing, you'll notice a change in Clover's sprite. In Undertale, the whole way through Genocide, Frisk's sprite stays the same. However, after only just killing a few monsters, you'll see that Clover's immediately changed and now their face is completely hidden from seeing, already showing that the few homicides you've already made is enough to change your path completely. After killing Dolph in cold blood and finishing the ruins section, there's some dialogue that Flowey states which kinda does connect with what I said previously. If you decide to quit Genocide now, although you may be able to save yourself in some regards, you've already committed enough sins to warrant you the neutral route, which is something I spoke about in another video, which we already know how that ends. Even Flowey teases you a bit with the dialogue when he states our little secret. But alas, we won't stop the mass killings, will we? So let's move forward. In Snowdin, you have a large radius of victims and also new methods to kill monsters. Some are more despicable than others. One I want to mention is Frost Hermit. You see, Normally you can just go about killing them and their igloo turns into dust after a bit of talking. But if you have seen pacifists and you pacified them previously, you would know that after a bit of using act, you can get Frostermat out of their igloo. Using that advantage, you can kill them while they're out of their igloo, which is pretty fucked up, but it just goes to show how much layers each and every enemy in Undertale has. Anyways, just as Flowey does in the neutral route, he plays a very big role in this route, so we're just gonna check on him time to time. Starting with this one, where Flowey talks about how Snowdin went from a cheery place to essentially a liminal space in a matter of moments, all because of us. Once we reach the Honeydew Resort, the only people we see there are the band members, and they say how everyone started leaving once they were on set and how there was an impending danger, which did end up being us. But the band members don't even think about the possibility of us being the culprit. We have already started making changes to the underground as we go on our path to destruction. However, things are about to change as we meet Martlet in our first encounter. Martlet at first believes that we need to evacuate with her and they're attacking her out of fear until she realizes, you're the one they're all running from, aren't you? After facing off against us for a little while, she does do something no monster has done up until this point. She retreats. But do not think this is the last time we'll see her, as she gives this foreboding dialogue discussing about whatever comes next is what we deserve if we continue to stray down this path. She tries to reason with us one last time before flying off into the distance. We'll see her later on, but for now we can finally exit Snowdin and continue our monstrous rampage. Entering Aviator, the theme that plays on our trip to Dunes changes from a nice happy track to a more deep and relaxing track. Nothing bad about this track in particular, and trust me there are far darker tracks to come, but this shows an alternative as to what's to come. Quite Stray actually has a small motif of Your Best Friend, which I just wanted to point out. But moving on to the Wild East, there are a few minor highlights that deserve recognition. There's so much to go over in this section of the game, but any extra stuff could be saved for one more video. Something funny I do want to mention before we continue on to this route is that you encounter Mo in this section and he realizes that you are the killer from Snowdin, but he doesn't actually give a shit. It's pretty comedic, but I mean, hey, if he makes money from it, he wouldn't care if we're a complete monster, which we kind of are, but you get the point. In Dunes, there's a small sand igloo that I want to mention because inside of it holds a sapling, or well, a growing one in the pacifist version. In pacifist, the dialogue for it states that the sapling is new to life and has lots of potential but has not reached it yet, and maybe someday it will. However, in Genocide, this sapling is decaying and the only land that shows up when you interact with it is withered away. And this one little sapling has a lot of meaning to it. Think about it this way, there are several monsters in the underground, several beings who want to do great things just like humans, several of them who want to break out of the barrier, some want to do other stuff. But when you come in, just like the sapling, all that is gone. Everything they were working towards, all their dreams are now crushed because of you. Continuing forward in the Wild East, we enter a midpoint of the Genocide route and a brief encounter occurs with Starlo before we shoot him without a second thought. It's funny because in Pacifist during that draw, he would fake being dead for a little while before moving on to the next mission, but this time he's really gonna die. Seroba comes in right after he's already beginning to pass away and they have a small final talk before Starlo dies right in front of her. Before we move on to the huge behemoth of a fight which is Seroba's Genocide fight, I just want to analyze her character a bit. Both mentally and physically, she's probably one of the strongest characters in Undertale Yellow. I mean, just look at this from her lens. She's already lost her husband, then lost her daughter from an injection, which was a sacrifice that could be turned to a weapon against the humans that trapped in the underground for so long, and then she lost her best friend to a human, and watched all three of them die right in front of her. At that point, most people would have probably just laid down and died, because I mean, what's there left to lose, right? What's worth persisting? Well, Seroba still has determination left in her, and with her final stand, she faces off against us in basically Undertale Yellow's version of the Undying Genocide fight. She doesn't even give us a moment to breathe this time, though. As soon as we begin the fight, she starts by giving us a fucking Kamehameha blast. And this fight, I love so fucking much. Not only is Seroba my favorite character right next to Flowey, but there's so much good shit to talk about in this fight. Firstly, let's talk about the Kamehameha blasts. These blasts lower both your HP and the HP that you can regenerate. So basically, if you had, say, maybe 56 HP before this fight, and you get hit by a few Kamehameha blasts, your HP will lower and your max HP will also lower, like 50 or less. Some of the attacks are reused for the pacifist first phase of her battle, but many are newly introduced and used to increase the difficulty. Even the reused ones are already 10 times harder than the original. Now let's look at the music, because dear god, I've been waiting so long to cover this. Trial of Fury is literally up there with Afterlife and Best Friends Forever. It's actually so fire. Originally I thought it to be better than A Mother's Love, but both are equally peak. Going over the song itself, it begins with this oriental kind of beat that you would hear in something like Blossom before changing to this really intense beat. 034 specifically in this track is one of my favorite sections, as it feels like this track is showing the desperation in Seroba while she's trying to kill you, and also showing how dark things have gotten. 057 is also a really fire part of the track, as it shows the sort of build before the climax at 148, which kinda just replays itself from the beginning. As you can see, I absolutely adore this fight and the music that comes with it. Oh, and you thought we were done? No, not just yet. Once you activate phase 2 and diminish 75% of her health bar, her sprite actually changes. Her hair is all roughed up and you can begin to see cuts on her face, which is honestly pretty sad. But alas, once you get her health down to 0, she sends one final message to you before dying. Once you wipe us out, hope you choke on the dust that will fill the air. In the meantime, Go to hell. With Seroba eliminated, the entire Wild East section is finished. Moving on to Steamworks, we are around 70% into Genocide. As Clover meets up with Flowey again and something interesting happens this time. The relationship has now gotten pretty rocky. Flowey is starting to notice some flaws in this, such as how we shoot everything as an answer, and when that doesn't work, we use Flowey. Flowey gets pretty pissed but obliges and opens the gate into Steamworks. Before we move into Steamworks, however, he does give us a pretty threatening message. We'll get back to him soon enough. In Steamworks, we encounter Axis for the first time, and well, we don't wait just a second fighting back. As he tries to take us down, we shoot him 3 times in the chest and send him flying back. This whole arc that plays out in Steamworks Pacifist is now flipped on its head for Genocide. Instead of us being Axis's prey, we have become the predator, and Axis have become our prey. This theme will continue as we go more into Steamworks. But before we actually face off against Axis, I want to highlight something during Greenhouse, because as most know, this is my favorite part of the game. How could I ignore it? As we reach the place where you would normally encounter Gardener, instead we see Axis warn them to go back into hiding instead of provoking them. I think this comment I saw recently basically sums up how I feel about this section, so I'll highlight it here. And the original comment was made by AZRX. Imagining being Gardener in the Genocide run, you've been hibernating for God knows how long, and then all of a sudden you're awoken by someone. And before you can process how everything you've ever known is an overgrown ruin, you're immediately told to avoid a maniacal child on a murder spree. And then, as you go back into hibernation, you see said kid in your peripheral vision. And now we move on to the Axis fight itself, because I'm sorry, I can't keep myself waiting for any longer. I love this fight just as much as the Seroba one. As you confront Axis, he talks about how he's evacuated as many people as he could, and he beckons us to face him. Not afraid this time. With that, he takes the same trash can we used to defend ourselves in Pacifist and uses it to defend himself instead, kickstarting the fight. And before we get into the fight itself, let's discuss his music as I did last time, because my god, this track, End of the Line, is heavenly. It's a Genocide counterpart to the original track in Pacifist Guns Blazing, and I know this might be a bit of a hot take, but this is like thousands of times better in comparison. I mean, the song is a fucking banger. How is this song not on Spotify? Please someone put this on Spotify, I beg. Anyways, on to the fight itself, it works entirely different from the one in Pacifist. Rather than us having a shield and being stuck to one place, we are now able to free roam, and there's entirely new attack patterns that are pretty confusing and hard to memorize unless you're a professional in that sense. Also, you'll immediately notice how the soul icon begins to shake when you select stuff. This all culminates to a climax when after a few attacks, Axis begins talking to us while shielding himself, revealing that he had no choice but to neutralize one of the humans that came down here in the past. And this completely pisses off Clover. Not even us, like Clover the character, because what did we come here for? To find the 5 humans that went here and vanished mysteriously. And of course, justice must be brought down. The soul begins pulsating more as it heals us back to max and penetrates his Axis shield. Oh, but it doesn't stop there, as we get leveled up multiple times before another blast begins powering up, and then Axis completely gets demolished in a matter of moments, reduced to a bunch of metal clinging onto each other by a thread. Even Flowey is shocked when he sees this. We ignore Flowey and continue moving forward. This time, however, a voice begins speaking in our heads. It guides us through Hotland before we reach the apartment complex. Feels familiar, huh? This is where we started a neutral route, but this time things will be very different. Rather than playing the music in the apartment, there is just this buzzing silence as everyone has now abandoned this place in search of escapism from us. This is honestly one of the more scarier locations of Undertale, but we'll get back to this after our final battle for Genocide, which we will get into right now. As we reach the rooftop, we encounter Martlet once more, and don't waste a second as we pull our gun immediately. Something I overlooked was our second encounter earlier in Dunes, but I skipped over that since it was just kind of her trying to persuade us and warn us again. But no more warnings this time, as she pulls out the boss monster serum that Seroba had and she injects herself immediately. Then we get to probably what is one of the most coolest transformations in all of Undertale media. After transforming, we enter the beginning of the end. This Martlet fight is the Sans equivalent to Undertale Yellow. There's so much to talk about in this one fucking fight that it could be a video on its own, so I'll try my best not to gush over it too much. While this is not my favorite fight in Genocide, I can see why people adore this fight so much, but also it is a pain in the ass, truly. The first phase of the fight consists of shooting Martlet's shield to try and shatter it while you have to avoid some incredibly tight spots and Martlet's super fast feathers that can take a ton of damage in HP. Also, the dash skill is now put into full effect as it becomes a means to escape from near-death segments in this fight. She now also has claws that will catch you off guard if you stay in one place for too long. But let's talk about the music for a bit, shall we? The track that you are hearing now is Remedy, and it's super good. It really increases the intensity of this fight because this is Martlet's last chance to stop you, as the only thing that separates you from the king is her. Maybe Flowey too, but let's be real, at this point he's mincemeat. but oh, don't worry, we'll get back to him soon enough. After Wild Persistence Phase 1 concludes when we penetrate her shield completely, sending us into a cutscene just like how we saw a cutscene with Seroba during the final fight in Pacifist. In this flashback, we see Chujin and Martlet interact, and Chujin's trying to give Martlet a warning about what could happen if she became a royal guard, which she ended up doing, and now she's met with this fate. We also see how she found the serum, and that sends us straight into Phase 2. Phase 2 is definitely a lot better than Phase 1 in my eyes. It feels a lot darker in the sense that her death is slow and painful, unlike any other boss we've seen. I'll elaborate that in a moment, but first let's talk about this music once more. Retribution is the track that plays in the second phase, and it is far superior than Remedy in my opinion. It's both intense and has that feeling of desperation. And how could I not talk about the part in 043? We have peaked in Undertale Yellow, especially in Genocide tracks. Phase 2 is way harder than Phase 1 as it is now a combination of dashing, type movement, and incredibly fast feather attacks, and now fucking meteors. Definitely requires some super good sight reading, that is what I will say. Now let's talk about the painful death, right? At 75% of her health, you can already start to notice signs of her growing weaker. She's breathing a ton, her body seems like it's beginning to melt, and you can see a background change too. This only gets worse as we go on. Below half HP, it's clear her body is deteriorating, and the background has begun to be covered in what seems to be some sort of blood. At 25% remaining, she begins to panic, and she gets confused as to why the boss monster power is wearing off. No longer is she confident about killing us, and she's just pleading for her life just to last a bit longer so she can try to get a few hits in. By now, the entire background is nearly shattered to pieces, covered in this black substance. Once you finish her off, she tries to get in her last words, but she is abruptly stopped by her body breaking down, and she begins to beg for her life as she melts into goo and then is turned into dust, concluding the final fight of Genocide. Looking back now, I seem to appreciate this fight way more than when I saw it for the first time. Sure, it's amazing when I first saw it, but it didn't feel as the same level as Axis and Seroba's fight. But now I realize that it doesn't matter because all three of these fighters I mentioned are incomparable, all unique, all amazing in their own right. Remember when I mentioned Flowey earlier during the fight? Well, this is where it comes into play. Although Martlet was not able to finish this off, she created enough of a distraction to put the entire underground on lockdown, and this pisses off Flowey. He reveals his true intentions about absorbing the human souls, and now Clover's pissed off, and the two have a small battle using the loading power that Flowey had. After trying to kill Clover several times, Flowey completely loses it. This is honestly probably one of my favorite scenes of Flowey in Undertale Yellow, even including the neutral routes. And then Genocide route of Undertale, Flowey would begin begging us to not kill him, but in this Genocide route, Flowey does not give a single shit, and he actually disses us and then laughs when we kill him off. The writing for Flowey in Undertale Yellow is just chef's kiss. I love it. Then we enter the final segment of the Genocide route, and probably one of the most haunting parts in Undertale Yellow ever. See, I've been hinting to this for a while now, but there's one track in particular in Genocide that just shakes me to my core. The one reason why I decided to go to such lengths to make this video. This track that plays is the final track in Undertale Yellow Genocide, and it's called Honest Day's Work. This is the second to last track of the OST too. Now that we're at this point, now that I'm writing this section, I almost have a loss of words. I remember listening to this track one night, preparing myself for this video, and when I heard it, I was shook. The track begins with silence. For the first minute of the track, it just has echoes of noises playing. It gives me this kind of feel that you would get from both Disc 11 and Disc 13 of Minecraft. This matches with what's going on in the game too, because as you go back to save your game, you notice that the entire apartment complex has been completely shut down. It was already isolated, but now there's no light in there at all, matching with the theme of decay that's been going on for the whole Genocide route. Eventually, all this apartment complex will be is a remnants of an old place where people would reside. Honest Day's Work continues to build up in the track. By 2 minutes, you begin to hear a faint theme that slowly builds up. It continues to get worse and worser. I mean, you can almost imagine everything that's going on just by listening to this haunting song. It reaches a head at 3:24 before completely going silent. In my eyes, what I feel this song is trying to represent is your sins. Every kill, every innocent turned into dust. Everything you've done up until now, continuously repeating in your mind. The echoes of screams and pleading and begging all turn to silence. There are no more monsters that remain in your path. No one running, no one screaming, or no one begging. Just silence. This song really hits hard for me, you know? It makes you feel like a real monster for everything you've done. But enough about gushing on this spooky track. Let's finish this rodeo. Passing through New Home, we reach Asgore after all this time. He goes on about how the monsters will rebuild, and the damage Clover has done will be sure to make it so war for monsters and humans will never end. Asgore tries to kill us, but he can do so little to match up against our strength by now. So we erase him and we move forward, obtaining all the 5 souls and exiting through the barrier, concluding Genocide route, along with this video. I hope you had enjoyed watching through this video essay. I had not intended to make it so long, but you guys wished for more, so I will deliver. This is probably the last Undertale Yellow video I'll make for a while, but you may see me pop up in an Undertale Yellow stream of my friends as he's still going through the game right now. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around in the next one.